There's a quiet lie sitting at the center of modern retirement advice. It doesn't scream. It doesn't look dangerous. In fact, it often comes dressed as guidance, responsible, even helpful. And the lie is this: if your savings number isn't huge, your retirement must be weak. That idea quietly follows people for years. It sits in the back of your mind while you work, save, and worry. It creeps in when you hear people throw around million-dollar targets like they're normal. And it makes a lot of good, hard-working people feel behind when they may not be behind at all. Because when it comes to a government pension, the story is very different. You are not just looking at a pile of money. You are looking at a stream of income, month after month, year after year. And if you don't understand that difference, you can misread your whole future. Let me just say, if this content resonates with you, the subscribe button is right there. I never waste my viewers' time. And today, I want to help you look at retirement with clearer eyes. Not through fear, not through bragging, but through real life. Think of it this way. Your income floor is like the foundation of your house. Strong, underground, invisible, but holding everything up. Your savings? That's more like the furniture. The furniture matters. You want enough of it. You want comfort. But if the foundation is solid, the whole house feels safer, steadier, calmer. That is what a government pension can do in retirement. It can act like a foundation under your life. Not exciting maybe, not flashy, but quietly powerful in a way many people do not appreciate until much later. So the real question isn't, do you have a giant retirement account? It's, how much reliable income will show up every single month when work stops? That is the question that changes everything. That is the question too many people never ask until the last minute. Let me show you what I mean. Barbara is 67. She spent 31 years working for a county office. She lives in a modest paid-off home and has about $182,000 in savings. Now, if you just looked at Barbara's savings, you might feel sorry for her. A lot of people would. They'd say, that's not enough. But Barbara has a pension that brings in $2,260 a month, and she expects Social Security on top of that. Then there's Susan. Susan is 65. She worked in private industry, has about $915,000 in retirement accounts, and rents a nice city apartment. On paper, Susan looks like the winner by a mile. But Susan wakes up thinking about the market. She checks balances too often. She worries about withdrawing too much too early. And every dip in her account feels like bad weather moving toward her front door. Barbara sleeps fine. Susan does not. Barbara knows most of her basics are covered before she touches savings. Susan has more money, but less certainty, and that difference changes how retirement feels every single day. It's not about who has more saved. It's about who has more certainty. That line matters more than most people realize, because retirement is not lived on a spreadsheet. It's lived 1 month at a time. Let me ask you something. Do you know what your monthly income will actually look like when you retire? Be honest with yourself. Not the dream number, not the account balance, the actual money that lands in your life each month. Here's the thing. People love big numbers because big numbers feel safe. $1 million sounds solid. It sounds finished. It sounds like a wall between you and worry. But a big number without a plan can quietly create stress. And a smaller number with strong income can create peace. That is the part people miss. They compare bank balances when they should be comparing monthly reality. Think of retirement like 2 buckets in your kitchen sink. One bucket fills itself every month. The other bucket only drops if you keep scooping from it. Your pension belongs in the first bucket. That is why a government pension matters so much. It is not just money you have. It is money you do not have to argue with. You do not have to guess how much of it is safe to spend in a bad market year. And if your pension has a COLA, a cost of living adjustment, that matters even more, because inflation is like an ice cube in the sun. It doesn't melt all at once. It quietly shrinks your buying power while everything around you gets a little more expensive. Groceries creep up. Insurance nudges higher. Property taxes don't ask your permission. Healthcare quietly erodes the comfort you thought you had. A pension with some inflation protection can soften that blow in a way savings alone often cannot. Now listen, not every government pension is the same. Some are generous, some are modest, some increase over time, and some stay mostly flat. That means you cannot just say, I have a pension, so I'm good. You have to ask better questions. How much does it pay? When does it start? Does it rise with inflation? Or will the same check buy less every year? And there is another piece of this that matters more than people think. Social Security timing. A lot of people see pension income and think that means Social Security is simple. It isn't always simple, but it can be clearer than it looks. Imagine 3 doors in front of you. One says 62. One says full retirement age, which for many people lands around 66 or 67. And one says 70. Door 62 gives you money sooner. That can help if you need the income right away. But it usually means a smaller monthly benefit for life. Door 70 makes you wait longer, but it gives you a larger monthly check. That larger check is not magic. It's the system rewarding you for waiting. And for many people, the increase continues until age 70. That means the monthly amount can be meaningfully higher if you delay. But here is where people get tripped up. They ask, what's the best age to claim? That sounds smart. It sounds disciplined, but it is still the wrong starting point. The real question isn't what age wins on paper. It's what choice fits your health, your pension, your spouse, your savings, and your need for certainty. That is the question adults ask. That is the question real retirement decisions are built on. I want to know, have you ever felt like you were doing everything right but still felt behind? You are not alone. That feeling hits a lot of people with pensions too, especially when they compare themselves to friends with giant account balances. Let me bring Barbara back into the picture, because Barbara's pension lets her make a different Social Security decision. She is not forced to grab benefits at the first possible moment out of panic. She has breathing room. Breathing room matters. It gives you options. Options let you think instead of react. And reacting is where a lot of expensive retirement mistakes begin. Susan, on the other hand, feels pressure from the opposite side. She has assets, yes, but the market is her mood ring. When stocks fall, she starts thinking maybe she should claim early just to feel safer. That is fear making the call. And fear is expensive. It quietly pushes people into decisions that feel relieving today but weaker later. That is why guaranteed income matters so much. It doesn't just support your budget, it supports your judgment. Now let me say something important for people with a public pension. A lot of folks are still using old advice about how pensions affect Social Security, and that can create unnecessary stress. Some of those old reduction rules changed recently, so outdated estimates can mislead you. That means you should not build your retirement plan around a rumor. Do not use what your neighbor heard 5 years ago. Do not rely on an old calculator someone posted online. Get current numbers. Get clean numbers. Get your own numbers. Because real data and perceived data are not the same thing. Perceived data says, I feel behind. Real data says, my essential expenses are $3,900, my pension is $2,260, and my expected Social Security at 67 is this much. One is emotion, the other is planning. That does not mean emotion is bad. It just means emotion should not drive the whole car. You need numbers and feelings working together, not feelings alone. Think about sequence of returns risk, like starting a road trip in a thunderstorm. If bad weather hits in the first 10 minutes, it affects the whole drive. In retirement, if market losses hit early while you are withdrawing money, the damage can linger much longer. That is one reason a pension is so valuable. It can reduce how much you need to pull from investments during bad years. And when you pull less during a downturn, you give your savings more time to recover. That quiet protection is worth more than most people ever calculate. Quick question for you. If your retirement income was completely guaranteed for life, would you feel different right now? Most people would. Not because they suddenly need less money, but because certainty changes the emotional weight of every decision. And this is where the million-dollar myth falls apart. The internet makes it sound like retirement success begins at some giant number, but that number means very little without context. $1 million for one person can feel fragile. Much less for another can feel solid. Let's say someone has $1 million and needs to pull $5,500 a month to keep life going. That account has a job to do every single month. Now let's say another person has $220,000, but their pension and Social Security cover most essentials. Who is really under more pressure? Usually it's the first person, because pressure does not come from the size of the pile. It comes from how hard that pile has to work. That is a completely different way to think about retirement. Think of a pension like a paycheck that never asks you to log in again. No boss, no alarm clock, no office politics, just a deposit showing up to do its job. That changes your spending behavior too. People with stronger guaranteed income often feel more permission to actually use retirement money. Not recklessly, not foolishly, just normally. And that matters, because retirement is not only a math problem, it is also a permission problem. A lot of people have enough, but they never feel safe enough to enjoy it. Susan feels guilty when she spends. Dinner out feels like account leakage. A short trip feels like she is stealing from her future self. Even replacing old furniture can feel like a moral failure. Barbara thinks differently, not because she is careless, because her income floor is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. She still watches money, but she doesn't feel punished by normal life. Here's a question for the married folks. Have you and your spouse ever actually talked about what happens if one of you is gone? That is not a cheerful topic. I know, but it is one of the most loving conversations you can have. Because survivor planning changes the picture. One spouse may lose one Social Security check when the other dies. A pension may continue fully, partially, or not at all, depending on the option chosen. And household expenses usually do not fall by half just because one person is gone. Think of spouse planning like packing for winter before the cold arrives. You do it while the sky is still clear, not because you are negative, because you are responsible. If you are married, you need to know which income streams survive and which ones don't. You need to know what happens to the pension. You need to know what happens to Social Security. And you need to know whether the remaining spouse can stay financially steady. This is also where people underestimate expenses. They imagine retirement as a calm little version of working life. But expenses don't disappear. They change clothes. Commuting may drop, but home repairs show up. Medical costs creep in. You may travel more, help family more, or spend more just because you are finally living the life you postponed. That is why your plan needs to separate must-haves from nice-to-haves. Not to make life smaller, to make choices clearer. When you know what your essentials really cost, your pension becomes easier to value. Let me ask you, have you ever calculated what your pension is actually worth in real dollars? Most people never do. They hear the monthly amount and move on, but the value can be enormous. If a pension pays $2,500 a month for life, that is $30,000 a year. Now ask yourself how large an investment account would need to be to safely produce that same income. Suddenly, that pension does not look modest anymore. That does not mean you ignore savings. Savings still matter. They cover flexibility, surprises, fun, and the gaps guaranteed income doesn't fill. But once again, the order matters. Your pension and Social Security are the floor. Your savings are the cushion. When people reverse that mentally, they feel shakier than they really are. They sit on a strong foundation and still act like the house might collapse. And let me be clear about something else. A pension does not automatically mean you should delay Social Security to 70. Sometimes waiting makes sense. Sometimes claiming earlier makes sense. There is no universal answer. Health matters. Life expectancy matters. Work status matters. Spouse age matters. And if waiting forces you to drain savings too aggressively, that matters too. Quick check. Do you know your full retirement age for Social Security? Most people don't. And that one detail quietly affects everything from claiming strategy to survivor planning. You don't need to memorize rules, but you do need to know your own starting point. For some of you, the smartest move is using the pension to delay Social Security and lock in a higher lifelong check. For others, the pension plus early Social Security creates enough peace and enough cash flow right now. Either way, the answer comes from your situation, not somebody else's headline. And if you worked in a job where Social Security taxes were not always paid, please do not assume old pension reduction rules still define your future. Check current guidance. Get updated estimates. Too many people are carrying yesterday's fear into today's plan. Think of old retirement advice like using an old roadmap after the highway has changed. You may still get somewhere, but you can also take a long, wrong turn without realizing it. That is exactly what outdated benefit assumptions can do. Here's something to think about. If you found out today that you're actually on track, how would that change your week? Seriously, how would you sleep tonight? How would you talk to your spouse? How would you feel when you opened your statements? Because a lot of retirement stress is not coming from actual disaster. It is coming from undefined reality. You haven't measured the right things, so every unknown feels dangerous. Clarity removes a surprising amount of fear. And clarity starts with a few simple moves. First, write down every guaranteed income source you expect. Your pension, your Social Security at different claiming ages, any annuity if you have one, any income that rises with inflation. Then write down your essential monthly expenses, not your ideal fantasy budget, your real one: housing, food, insurance, utilities, transportation, medicine, the bills that keep life stable. After that, compare the two, not with emotion, not with pride, not with shame. Just compare them. If guaranteed income covers most or all essentials, that is a very important fact. It does not solve everything, but it changes the level of risk your savings must carry, and that can completely reshape your retirement choices. Next, run Social Security 3 ways. What if you claim at 62? What if you claim at full retirement age? What if you wait until 70? Look at the monthly income under each version, not just the lifetime guess. Then ask a spouse question right away. If one of you dies first, what income remains? What disappears? What gets reduced? Do not push that off. That is not morbid. That is mature. After that, stress test your first 5 years of retirement. If markets fall early, how much would you need from savings? Could your pension and Social Security cover enough to let investments breathe? That is sequence of returns risk in plain English. And finally, review your pension choices like someone who will someday leave instructions for the person they love most. Did you choose the right survivor option? Are your beneficiaries current? Does your spouse know where the income comes from and when it arrives? These are not glamorous steps. They won't go viral, but they are the kind of steps that quietly turn fear into confidence. And retirement rewards quiet competence more than almost anything else. Now listen to this carefully. There are people with large retirement accounts who never stop feeling exposed. And there are people with government pensions who underestimate how strong their position really is. Both groups are looking at the wrong thing. The first group is staring at a pile. The second group is overlooking a paycheck. One feels rich and uneasy, the other feels modest and may actually be more secure. That is why retirement planning has to move beyond balance worship. You may already have what people with millions are searching for. Not a flashy number, not bragging rights. Something better. A dependable base that makes the rest of your retirement easier to build. And if that base is smaller than you'd like, that does not mean you failed. It means you need a cleaner plan. Maybe you delay Social Security, maybe you trim expenses, maybe you keep a bigger cash buffer, maybe you make one smart pension election change before retirement begins. But whatever you do not let the culture of giant numbers define your self-worth. Do not let someone else's screenshot become your standard. And do not let a pension be treated like some side note in your own financial life. It is not a side note. It may be the center. Think about this. There are people with millions of dollars who don't feel secure. And there are people with modest savings who sleep soundly every night. The difference isn't the number. The difference is understanding. Understanding your income, understanding your expenses, understanding what actually matters. That's the difference between stress and peace. If this gave you a new perspective, if it made you think differently, even just a little, then subscribe. The more clarity you build now, the stronger your future becomes. And if you have a government pension, don't overlook it. It may be doing more for your retirement than you think.